My family deliberately ignored my 30th birthday, then threw my sister a huge party. The silence was deafening, but they made a mistake. They sent me the group chat where they planned it all, and I used it to plan my own little surprise. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The day I turned 30, the world greeted me with a profound and unshakable silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleepy morning or the meditative calm of a library. It was a heavy, cavernous silence, the kind that echoes with everything that isn't being said. I woke up that morning with a familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach, a feeling I'd learned to associate with any occasion that was supposed to be about me. Birthdays, in my family, were less a celebration of the individual and more a referendum on their current standing within the rigid, unspoken hierarchy. My phone, which I had purposefully placed on my nightstand, remained dark and inert. No cheerful happy birthday text from my mom, Brenda, no goofy last-minute message from my dad, and certainly nothing from my younger sister, Chloe, the undisputed sun in our family's solar system. I was merely a distant, rocky planet orbiting in her shadow. I told myself it was early. They were busy. Mom was probably organizing something elaborate, and she liked to wait until everything was perfect before making the grand reveal. I padded into my small kitchen, the floorboards cool beneath my feet, and made coffee. My apartment, a cozy space I'd curated with second-hand furniture and an abundance of thriving plants, felt like my only true sanctuary. Here, I was Chloe's older sister. I was just Clara, a grant writer for an animal shelter, a woman who preferred the company of purring cats to strained family gatherings. As the morning bled into the afternoon, the knot in my stomach tightened. I scrolled through my phone, my thumb hovering over my family's contact info. I saw the stream of birthday wishes from friends, from my wonderful colleagues at the shelter, and even a sweet e-card from my Aunt Susan, my dad's sister. But the central column of my family's text chain remained empty. I distracted myself with work, hammering out a proposal for a new senior cat adoption program. I loved my job. It gave me a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with my family's expectations. I was good at it, too. I could weave words together to convince donors to open their hearts and their wallets for abandoned animals. I could articulate their silent pleas. It was a skill I had apparently failed to master for myself. By 5 p.m., the silence had become a roar. It filled every corner of my apartment. I checked my phone again. Nothing. The hope that had been a flickering candle in the morning had been snuffed out, leaving behind a thin trail of bitter smoke. They hadn't forgotten. Forgetting was accidental. This felt deliberate. This felt like a statement. What had I done? I retraced the past few weeks. There had been a minor disagreement, if one could even call it that. My mother had suggested I lend Chloe a significant amount of money for a down payment on a new car. Chloe's event planning business was supposedly thriving, but her spending habits always outpaced her income. "She just needs a little bridge loan, sweetie," my mom had said, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. "You're so good with money." It was a backhanded compliment, of course. What she meant was that my life was small and inexpensive, so I should have plenty to spare. For the first time in my adult life, I had said no. Politely but firmly. I told them I was saving for a down payment on my own small condo, a goal I had been working toward for years. The silence on the other end of the line had been telling. My mother had simply said, "I see," in a tone that was colder than a winter frost. Could that be it? Could they be so cruel as to punish me for establishing a simple boundary? It seemed impossibly petty, even for them. I ordered a pizza for one and sat on my couch, scrolling through photos of other people's happy families on social media. I saw pictures of surprise parties, lavish gifts, and heartfelt captions celebrating beloved daughters and sisters. Each image was a small, sharp sting. At 9 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. My heart leaped with a pathetic, conditioned hope, but it was just a notification from a food delivery app. The silence from my family was now absolute. They had let my entire 30th birthday pass without a single acknowledgement. Not a call, not a text, not even a belated, guilt-ridden message. It was a deliberate erasure. They had held a referendum, and the results were in. I was not worth celebrating. I blew out the single candle I'd stuck in a cupcake I'd bought myself from the bakery down the street. I didn't make a wish. What was the point? As I went to bed that night, the quiet of my apartment felt different. It was no longer a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. The silence wasn't just an absence of sound, it was the clearest message they had ever sent. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The week following my non-birthday was a blur of forced normalcy. I went to work, buried myself in grant proposals, and spent my evenings volunteering in the shelter's kitten nursery, finding solace in the tiny, vibrating bodies that demanded nothing from me but warmth and food. I told my friends that my family was planning a belated celebration, a lie that felt sticky and shameful in my mouth. The truth was too humiliating to admit. They hadn't just forgotten, they had discarded me. Every time my phone rang, my stomach twisted into a familiar knot of dread and a flicker of foolish hope. I was a mouse in a lab experiment, conditioned to expect a shock, but still hoping for a pellet of cheese. When my mother's name finally flashed on the screen the following Tuesday, I let it ring 3 times before answering, trying to project an air of casual indifference I was far from feeling. "Clara, honey, I was just thinking about you." Brenda's voice was unnaturally bright, like a fluorescent light that hums with a high, irritating frequency. "Hi, Mom," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Listen, we're having a casual family get-together this Saturday. Just a little barbecue at the house. Your dad's going to grill. It's been too long since we all got together." A barbecue? My 30th birthday, a milestone that society deems significant, was met with a wall of silence, and the follow-up was a casual barbecue. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. "I'm not sure if I'm free," I said, the lie tasting a little less bitter this time. "Oh, don't be silly," she chirped, completely ignoring my hesitation. "It's for Chloe. We just wanted to do a little something for her birthday. You know how she loves a party." Chloe's birthday wasn't for another 2 weeks. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. I thought her birthday was at the end of the month. "It is, we're just celebrating it a little early. Things get so busy, you know how it is." Her voice was a masterclass in passive aggression, each cheerful word a tiny, poisoned dart. The implication was clear. Chloe's schedule was important. Chloe's celebration warranted advance planning. My birthday, however, was an inconvenience that had been conveniently misplaced. Against my better judgment, a lifetime of conditioning to be the compliant, easygoing daughter won out. "Okay, Mom, I'll be there." "Wonderful, see you around 2 on Saturday, sweetie. Love you." She hung up before I could reply. The conversation left me feeling hollowed out, as if I'd been scraped clean with a spoon. Saturday arrived with a sense of grim inevitability. I dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, armor for the emotional battlefield I was about to enter. As I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, the same house I grew up in, a wave of unhappy memories washed over me. I remembered countless dinners where Chloe's dance recitals were the main topic of conversation, while my academic awards were met with a polite nod. I remembered the year my parents bought Chloe a pony for her 10th birthday, while for my 12th, I received a sensible encyclopedia set. When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see the street lined with cars. My mother's definition of a casual barbecue had clearly been an understatement. My stomach plummeted. I walked up the path and pushed open the front door, and was immediately met with a deafening roar of surprise. For a split second, my broken heart dared to hope. Maybe this was for me. Maybe this was their elaborate, albeit cruel, way of making up for their silence. But then I saw Chloe, standing in the middle of the living room, her face a perfect mask of feigned shock and delight. A massive banner hung over the fireplace, emblazoned with glittery letters. "Happy 28th, Chloe." The room was packed with dozens of people, family friends, Chloe's glamorous colleagues, and our extended family. My mother rushed over to me, grabbing my arm. "Isn't this wonderful? She had no idea." Brenda beamed, her eyes shining with a pride she never directed at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just ignored my birthday, they had used it as a setup for this. The casual barbecue was a lie to ensure my attendance, to force me to witness the grand celebration of my sister, the one who truly mattered. It was a public declaration of my worthlessness. I stood frozen in the entryway, a ghost at the feast. My sister, the guest of honor, floated through the room, accepting hugs and gifts, her laughter ringing out like a series of tiny, sharp bells. I found a corner of the kitchen and tried to become invisible, nursing a cup of watery punch. The air was thick with conversations I couldn't join and laughter that felt like a personal insult. No one seemed to notice my distress, or if they did, they chose to ignore it. I was a piece of furniture, a background extra in the movie of Chloe's life. After an hour of this quiet torture, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out the back door without saying goodbye to anyone. The silence in my car on the drive home was a comfort this time, a welcome relief from the noise of my own obsolescence. As I sat on my couch that night, the humiliation felt like a physical illness. I felt naive and foolish for ever expecting anything different. The pattern was set in stone decades ago. But as the anger began to burn through the fog of hurt, a new thought took hold, cold and clear. They were so confident in their cruelty, so certain of my passive acceptance. But they had forgotten one crucial thing about digital conversations: they leave a record. To understand the cruelty of my 30th birthday, you have to understand the soil it grew from. My family operated on a simple, unspoken principle. Chloe was for show, and I was for service. Chloe was the glitter, the bright, dazzling spectacle. I was the quiet, sturdy glue holding the whole production together from behind the scenes. From the moment Chloe was born, she was bathed in a spotlight that I had never known. She was a beautiful baby, and she grew into a charming child with blonde curls and a precocious smile that could coax a cookie from the stingiest neighbor. I was 2 years older, a quiet, observant child with mousy brown hair and a tendency to retreat into books. Where Chloe demanded attention, I learned to make myself small, to not be a bother. My mother, Brenda, was the director of this lifelong performance. She saw in Chloe a reflection of the glamorous life she'd always wanted. Chloe was enrolled in ballet, gymnastics, and theater camps. Our living room walls were a shrine to her achievements. Photos of her in tutus, ribbons from dance competitions, playbills with her name circled in red ink. My accomplishments were of a quieter nature. I won the school spelling bee in 4th grade. I got a perfect score on the verbal section of my SATs. These were met with a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Chloe's upcoming recital or her lead role in the school play. My father was a passive accomplice. A kind but conflict-avoidant man, he followed my mother's lead in all things. He loved us both, I believe, but he didn't have the fortitude to challenge the family's established narrative. It was easier to applaud for Chloe and offer me a quiet, sympathetic smile when he thought my mother wasn't looking. The dynamic solidified in our teenage years. Chloe was the popular cheerleader, her weekends filled with parties and dates. I was in the library, heading the debate club and volunteering for the school newspaper. When I was 16, I got a part-time job at a local diner to start saving for college. The money I earned was often borrowed by my mother to pay for Chloe's expensive cheerleading uniforms or trips with her friends. "You're so responsible, Clara," my mother would say, as if my responsibility was a resource to be mined for Chloe's benefit. The ultimate act of service came when I was a sophomore in college. My father was unexpectedly laid off from his accounting job. Panic set into our household. Chloe was a senior in high school, and my parents had promised her the world. A brand new car for graduation, a celebratory trip to Europe, the dorm room of her dreams at the expensive private university she'd set her heart on. My own education at the state school was more affordable, but my father's job loss threatened everything. Without being asked, I took a semester off and picked up more shifts at the diner back home. I handed over almost every paycheck to my mother, who took it with a sigh of relief. "Thank you, sweetie. You're a lifesaver. We just can't bear to disappoint Chloe." I watched as my hard-earned money went toward Chloe's graduation dress and a deposit for her dorm room. My own dream of studying abroad was quietly shelved and never spoken of again. I was the family's safety net, the emergency fund, the ever-reliable provider of support. But safety nets are meant to be invisible until they're needed. Chloe, for her part, accepted these sacrifices as her due. She never once thanked me. In her mind, the world was supposed to revolve around her. My role was simply to ensure its smooth rotation. She developed a particular brand of subtle cruelty, delivering cutting remarks with a sweet smile. "Oh, Clara, that sensible haircut is so you," she'd say. Or, "I wish I could be happy with a quiet night and like you, but I just get so bored." Each comment was designed to reinforce our roles. She was the exciting one, and I was the boring one. As we grew into adults, the script remained the same. She became an event planner, a job that perfectly suited her love for aesthetics and being the center of attention. I found my calling as a grant writer, a behind-the-scenes job that required meticulous work and a quiet passion. My mother would boast to her friends about Chloe's fabulous career, while describing my job as some kind of office work with computers. The silence on my 30th birthday wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being overlooked. It was the logical conclusion of a story in which I was always the supporting character. The surprise party for Chloe was just the final, blatant confirmation. It wasn't just that they preferred her. It was that my own milestones were seen as distractions from the main event. In their eyes, I wasn't just the second choice. I was barely a choice at all. And that quiet, aching truth was the foundation upon which their final, catastrophic mistake would be built. In the days following Chloe's surprise party, I existed in a state of suspended animation. The hurt was so profound it had become a dull, constant ache, like a phantom limb. I moved through my life mechanically: work, eat, sleep, repeat. I ignored my mother's chirpy follow-up texts asking if I'd had a fun time. I felt a profound sense of isolation, as if I were encased in a thick wall of glass, watching the rest of the world move on without me. The turning point came on a Wednesday evening. I was curled up on my sofa, wrapped in a blanket, mindlessly scrolling through my phone. An email notification popped up. It was from my cousin Liam. He was a few years younger than me, a sweet but slightly scattered guy who worked in it. The subject line was, "Party pics." My heart sank. The last thing I wanted was a visual record of my humiliation. The email body was short and misspelled. "Hey Clara, Mom said you wanted the photo album from the party. Here's the link to the cloud drive. Sorry it took me a sec. Liam." I frowned. I had never spoken to my aunt or Liam about photos. My mother must have told them I wanted them, another one of her passive-aggressive power plays, forcing me to relive the event. With a sigh of resignation, I clicked the link, expecting to see a gallery of Chloe's smiling face. But the link didn't open a photo album. It opened a folder on a cloud drive containing a single, oddly named file, Family Fun Chat Export, TXT. I stared at the file name, completely baffled. Family Fun was the name of our immediate family's group chat, the one with my mom, my dad, Chloe, and me. Why would Liam be sending me an export of our chat history? He wasn't even in that group. He must have gotten confused. He was probably supposed to send this to his own mother, or perhaps he'd mixed up his files. His scatterbrained nature had always been a running family joke. Curiosity overriding my apathy, I downloaded the file and opened it. My screen filled with lines of text, a complete time-stamped log of every message ever sent in our family group chat. It went back years. I scrolled idly at first, seeing the mundane chatter of everyday life. Then my eyes caught a date, August 12th, about 2 weeks before my birthday. I stopped scrolling. My breath hitched. "Mom, Clara's big 30 is coming up on the 24th. A pause, then a message from Chloe. "Chloe, oh right, that. Mom, I know, I was thinking we should just keep it low-key this year. Maybe just a card. I think she prefers it that way anyway. Dad sounds good to me. My blood ran cold. She prefers it that way. The casual, dismissive lie was typed out in stark black and white. I had never once said that. I had always loved birthdays, my own included. The lie was for her benefit, to absolve her of any effort. I kept reading, my hands beginning to tremble. Chloe, LOL low-key, as in non-existent, works for me. We need to put all our energy and budget into my party anyway. It needs to be perfect. Mom, exactly. We'll just let her day slide by. She won't make a fuss. She never does. Plus, honestly, I'm still annoyed about that car loan business. She needs to learn that being part of a family is a two-way street. There it was, the reason. It wasn't just favoritism, it was punishment. Punishment for setting a boundary. Punishment for daring to prioritize my own future. My refusal to fund Chloe's lifestyle was being repaid with this calculated, deliberate cruelty. The screen blurred as tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself to keep reading. The messages continued, a nauseating litany of their disregard. They discussed Chloe's party in excruciating detail, the caterer, the guest list, the decorations. My name only came up once more. Chloe, we have to make sure Clara comes to my party, though. It would look weird if she didn't. Mom, don't worry. I'll call her and tell her it's a casual barbecue. She'll fall for it. She always does. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I'll fall for it. She always does. They saw me as a fool, a predictable, passive pawn in their games. The quiet hurt that had been my constant companion for weeks was suddenly burned away by a white-hot rage. It was a fury so clean and clarifying that it felt like I was breathing for the first time. The glass wall around me shattered. The fog lifted. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't invisible. I was a target. And they had just handed me their entire battle plan, complete with their signatures at the bottom. Liam's mistake was a gift. He had accidentally armed me with the one thing they never thought I'd have: proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof of their intentions, their motivations, and their contempt for me. My grief and shame transformed into something cold and hard. A plan began to form in my mind, not of petty revenge, but of final, irrefutable truth. I would not scream or cry or accuse. That's what they expected. The emotional, sensitive Clara making a scene. No, I would do something far more devastating. I would use their own words to dismantle the facade of our happy family once and for all. My investigation was over. It was time to build my case. For the next 2 days, I lived with the group chat log like a secret talisman. I didn't reread it. The words were seared into my memory. The initial, volcanic anger had cooled into a strange, almost serene resolve. They had given me clarity, and for that, I was almost grateful. I finally understood that I wasn't deficient. The system I was in was toxic. And the only way to win a toxic game is to refuse to play. My first move was not to confront my mother or sister. An emotional, messy phone call was exactly the kind of drama they would thrive on. They would twist my words, call me hysterical, and paint me as the villain. They were masters of that game, and I would lose before I even started. I needed allies. I needed witnesses. My thoughts immediately went to Aunt Susan, my dad's sister. She and her husband, my Uncle Robert, had always treated me with a warmth and respect that was absent in my own home. They remembered my interests, asked about my work, and always sent thoughtful, personal gifts for my birthday. This year had been no exception. They had sent a beautiful fountain pen and a heartfelt card that had been one of the few bright spots in that dark week. I called her on Friday afternoon, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. "Clara, it's so good to hear from you," she said, her voice genuinely warm. "How are you, honey? We were sorry to miss Chloe's party, but Robert had that conference." "I'm okay, Aunt Susan. Actually, I need to talk to you about something. It's difficult." I took a deep breath, my voice trembling slightly. "It's about my birthday." I explained everything, starting with the silence on my 30th, the painful experience at Chloe's surprise party, and my mother's flimsy excuses. I kept my tone even, relaying the facts without letting the tidal wave of emotion behind them break through. Aunt Susan listened patiently, punctuating my story with soft sounds of sympathy and disbelief. "Oh, Clara, that's just awful. Brenda can be so thoughtless sometimes." "That's the thing, Aunt Susan," I said, my voice hardening. "It wasn't thoughtless, it was planned." And then I told her about the text file. I told her about Liam's accidental email and the contents of the group chat. As I spoke, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy and charged. When I finished, it took her a moment to speak. "She said what?" Her voice was low, laced with a fury I had never heard from her before. "Clara, are you serious?" "I can send it to you," I said quietly. "I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't read it." "Send it to me," she said, her voice grim. "Send it to me and Robert right now." I hung up and, with steady hands, forwarded Liam's email to both of them. For the next hour, I paced my small living room, my phone clutched in my hand. I had taken a huge risk. I had laid my family's ugly secret bare, and I could only hope that my aunt and uncle would see the truth and not just an attempt to stir up family drama. My phone rang. It was Uncle Robert. "Clara," he said, and his voice was all I needed to hear. It was firm, unwavering, and filled with a protective anger. "We read it, both of us. I am speechless. This is monstrous." Aunt Susan came on the line. "Honey, we are so sorry. You did not deserve any of this. The way Brenda and Chloe spoke about you, it's unforgivable." The validation was so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. For the first time, someone saw the truth. Someone believed me without question. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being too sensitive. I was being abused. "What do you want to do?" Uncle Robert asked. "You say the word, and I will call my brother and Brenda and give them a piece of my mind they will never forget." "No," I said, the plan solidifying in my mind. "That's what they'd expect, a big, shouting match that they can dismiss later. I want something else. I want them to face it, but not in a way they can control." I explained my idea. It was simple, but I thought effective. I would not seek revenge. I would simply hold up a mirror and force them to look at their own reflections in a setting where they couldn't run or hide. My aunt and uncle listened, and when I was done, they agreed without hesitation. They would be my backup, my witnesses. The trap, as it were, was not one of my own making. It was the truth. And the truth, I was beginning to realize, was the most powerful weapon I had. The stage was being set for a final confrontation, but it wouldn't be a fight. It would be an unveiling. With my aunt and uncle firmly in my corner, a sense of calm settled over me. I had a team. The crushing weight of the secret was no longer mine to bear alone. We agreed to wait for the right moment, a moment that we knew my mother, Brenda, would inevitably create. We didn't have to wait long. My withdrawal was subtle but total. I stopped responding to the family group chat. When my mother called, I let it go to voicemail, replying hours later with a brief, polite text. "Sorry, was busy. Hope you're well." I was a placid, unbreachable wall of polite indifference. For someone like my mother, who fed on emotional reactions, my neutrality was more infuriating than any angry outburst would have been. After a week of this, she began to escalate. The cheerful texts became laced with passive-aggressive guilt. "Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope everything is okay. Your father and I miss you. Chloe was asking about you. We're all a bit worried." I saw the messages for what they were. Attempts to pull me back into the familiar dynamic to provoke a response she could then manage and control. I refused to take the bait. My silence was my power. Finally, the call I had been waiting for came on a Tuesday night. I let it ring, took a deep breath, and then answered. "Clara, thank goodness." Brenda's voice was a frantic performance of relief. "I was getting so worried. You haven't been answering my calls." "I've been busy with work, Mom," I said, my voice level and calm. "Well, you're never too busy for your family," she chided gently. "Listen, I feel like there's been some distance between us lately. I think we just need to connect. I'm making a pot roast on Sunday. I want you to come for a family dinner, just the four of us. We need to clear the air. Clear the air? The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. She didn't want to clear the air. She wanted to reset the board, to put all the pieces back where they belonged, with me in my designated square of quiet compliance. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "Dinner on Sunday sounds fine." "Wonderful," she sounded relieved, confident that her authority was restored. "See you at 6. As soon as I hung up, I made 2 calls. The first was to Aunt Susan. "She's called the dinner," I said without preamble. "Sunday at 6? Aunt Susan asked. I could hear the grim satisfaction in her voice. "Perfect. Robert and I just happen to be in the neighborhood on Sunday. We'll plan on dropping by around 7 for dessert." "That sounds like a great idea," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "I think Mom would be so surprised." My second call was to my dad. This was the hardest part. While he was a passive enabler, he wasn't malicious like my mother and sister. He was just weak. "Hey, Dad," I said when he answered. "Clara Bean, how are you?" He sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. "I'm okay. Listen, I'm coming for dinner on Sunday, and I think Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert might stop by afterward." "Oh, that's great. It'll be nice to see them." "Dad," I said, my voice softening, "I need you to do something for me. On Sunday, I just need you to listen. Really listen. That's all." He was quiet for a moment. "Is everything all right, Clara?" "It will be," I said. "I just need you to listen." He didn't press. Perhaps he heard the steel in my voice that hadn't been there before. "Okay, sweetie, I will." The case was built. The witnesses were prepared. The stage was set for Sunday dinner. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into my parents' house as a lamb to the slaughter. I was walking in with a mirror, polished and ready, and I was prepared for whatever reflection it showed. My only goal was to walk out the other side, finally free. The stakes were no longer about winning an argument, they were about reclaiming my life. I walked into my parents' house on Sunday evening feeling preternaturally calm. The familiar anxiety that usually gripped me in their doorway was gone, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. The smell of pot roast hung heavy in the air, a scent that was supposed to mean comfort and family, but for me, it only smelled of obligation. My mother greeted me with a tight, brittle hug. "Clara, I'm so glad you came." Chloe was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and gave me a dismissive wave. "Hey." My father gave me a warm hug, but his eyes were filled with a worried curiosity. He remembered my strange request. Dinner was a masterclass in my family's dysfunction. My mother and Chloe dominated the conversation, talking about Chloe's upcoming projects, a friend's lavish wedding, and a vacation they were planning. They directed questions at me that were designed to highlight the smallness of my life in comparison. "How are things at that little animal shelter, dear?" my mother asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "Still cleaning cages." "I write grants, Mom," I said calmly. "And we just secured funding to build a new wing for senior dogs. It's very rewarding." Chloe snorted. "I could never do that. I'd be so bored. I need excitement." I just smiled and took a bite of my pot roast. I didn't defend myself. I didn't take the bait. I simply existed, a quiet observer at their one-woman show. My calm unnerved them. They were used to me being either apologetic or defensive. This serene version of Clara was a stranger to them. At precisely 7:05 p.m., the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," my father said, seeming relieved for the interruption. He opened the door to reveal Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert, all smiles. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd pop in," Aunt Susan announced, holding up a cheesecake. My mother's face flickered with annoyance. This was not part of her script, but she quickly recovered. "Susan, Robert, what a surprise. Come in, come in." We all gathered in the living room, the atmosphere thick with unspoken tensions. This was it. This was the moment. Brenda, ever the director, took center stage. She sat down, clasped her hands in her lap, and adopted a look of grave sincerity. "Well, now that we're all here, she began, glancing pointedly at me. I just want to say something. She paused for dramatic effect. Clara, honey, I know we missed your big day last month, and we are also so sorry. Chloe chimed in, her voice oozing fake remorse. We really are, Clara. Things just got so hectic with my party and everything. It was a total oversight. My mother nodded eagerly. Life just got in the way, you know how it is. We feel terrible about it, and we want to make it up to you. She looked at me, expecting tears or anger, or at the very least, a grateful acceptance of her magnanimous apology. I just looked at her, my silence stretched, filling the room. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. It's interesting that you call it an oversight, I said, because I know it wasn't. Life didn't get in the way, you planned it. Brenda's smile froze on her face. What? Clara, don't be ridiculous. Why on earth would we do that? Chloe scoffed. You're being overly dramatic. We said we were sorry. I don't think I am, I said, turning my gaze to my aunt. Aunt Susan. Aunt Susan, who had been sitting quietly, took out her phone. Her expression was grim. Brenda, she said, her voice steady and clear. On August 12th, you wrote in the family group chat, Clara's big 30 is coming up. I was thinking we should just keep it low-key this year. Maybe just a card. The color drained from my mother's face. My father stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. Aunt Susan continued, her eyes fixed on Chloe. And Chloe, you replied, LOL low-key as in non-existent, works for me. We need to put all our energy and budget into my party anyway. Chloe looked like she had been slapped. That's out of context, you can't just. Oh, there's more context, Uncle Robert interjected, his voice booming in the suddenly silent room. He looked at my mother. Brenda, you then wrote, we'll just let her day slide by. She won't make a fuss. She never does. Plus, honestly, I'm still annoyed about that car loan business. She needs to learn that being part of a family is a two-way street. The final, damning sentence hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My mother stared, speechless, her mask of maternal concern utterly shattered. She looked from me to her sister-in-law, her face a mixture of panic and fury. You had no right, she finally spat, her voice a venomous whisper. That was a private conversation. It stopped being private when you used it to plot against your own daughter, Aunt Susan shot back. I stood up, all eyes were on me. I looked at my mother, my sister, and my father one by one. I felt no anger. I felt no sadness. I felt only a profound sense of release. It wasn't a two-way street, Mom, I said, my voice shaking only slightly. It was a one-way street, and I was the one paying all the tolls. I'm done now. The road is closed. And with that, I turned and walked out the front door, leaving the ruins of our family behind me. The silence that followed my departure, I was later told by my aunt, was absolute. The carefully constructed facade of our happy family had been demolished in under 5 minutes, brought down by the weight of their own words. My mother and Chloe apparently cycled through a series of frantic, poorly executed defenses, denial, accusations of betrayal against my aunt, and finally, pathetic attempts to frame it all as a joke. But the words, read aloud in that quiet living room, were irrefutable. My father, for his part, simply sat there, looking at his wife and younger daughter as if seeing them for the first time. The reflection in the mirror was uglier than he could have ever imagined. I didn't wait to hear the outcome. I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel, a strange sense of lightness filling my chest. It felt as if I had been carrying a 100-pound backpack for 30 years and had finally set it down. When I got to my apartment, I didn't cry. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. For the first time, the quiet in my apartment didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was significant. My father called me the next day. His voice was heavy with shame. Clara, he said, I am so sorry. I had no idea I let you down. It was the most honest thing he had said to me in years. We talked for a long time. I didn't absolve him of his passivity, but I acknowledged his apology. Our relationship is still a work in progress, but it is now built on a foundation of truth, however painful. my mother and Chloe tried a different tactic. First came a barrage of angry texts, accusing me of trying to tear the family apart. When I didn't respond, their tone shifted to manipulative pleading, promising to make it right if I would just come back and help smooth things over with the extended family. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted me to help them rebuild the facade I had just destroyed. I blocked their numbers. The story of the group chat spread through our extended family like wildfire. Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert made sure of that. The support that flooded in was overwhelming. Cousins, aunts, and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to tell me they were on my side, sharing their own stories of feeling marginalized by my mother's narcissistic behavior. It turned out I was never truly alone. I was just isolated. Freed from the constant, low-level stress of my family's expectations, my life began to blossom. I poured my newfound energy into my work, my friendships, and myself. I started hiking on the weekends with friends from work. I took a pottery class. I finally opened a dedicated savings account and labeled it condo down payment. And this time, I knew the money was mine and mine alone. The greatest change was internal. The quiet, apologetic girl who was afraid of making a fuss was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth. I learned that family is not just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who respects you, and who celebrates you, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. My found family, my supportive relatives, my wonderful friends, my colleagues, became my rock. A year later, on my 31st birthday, I was on a plane to Italy, a trip I had paid for myself. My phone buzzed with messages all day long from my dad, my aunt and uncle, and the beautiful network of people who made up my real family. As I sat at a small cafe in Florence, sipping a cappuccino, I felt a sense of profound contentment. I had not sought revenge on my mother and Chloe. I had simply chosen myself. And in doing so, I had found the one thing they could never take away from me: my own happiness on my own terms. The silence I felt now was not one of neglect, but of serene, beautiful, and hard-won peace.